So, Juan.
Professor O'Kane, good to see you, man.
It's like we've never done this before, but it's our second time.
Right. A weird deja vu moment.
Yeah. Well, equipment failure, or which means I lost the files.
As you do.
Anyways, come here. It's great to have you here. And, I want to say that when I first heard about you, it was simply, I guess, how everybody is found these days. I was thumbing through Instagram and I saw this amazing stretch on the fretboard and I was like, what the... And I was like, I got to check this guy out. And aside from the amazing elasticity of your hands, there was some amazing elasticity in your music. And I really, really liked it. And that's what really brought me into you.
Oh, thank you.
And actually, let me rephrase that. And that's really what... that's really what turned me on to your music. I really think that you're a very, very good composer. Dare I say, incredible composer. And it's one of the things that is the centerpiece to your music. And I want to get right into talking about that.
Sure.
How did you get started composing?
So, my work as a composer kind of started... Actually, I never really started as a composer. In that I always wanted to. Some of my earliest influences musically were the great composers. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. From a very young age, that was some of my early exposition to music. And
right.
Kind of I always wanted to be a composer, but there was always this block. And it wasn't until I had lessons with Tim Miller that really opened me up to composing. And that was kind of like when I was around 19 or so. And through some work in those lessons, I started working on my own first tunes that became my first record. And ever since then, it just kind of snowballed because I think the process that I was working on with him really helped open me up and not be as self-critical on myself.
Oh, nice.
And not be too much in my head, because I would run into this problem of, I need to know this or I need to know that. I need to know more before I can start, which is the antithesis to starting.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you aren't going to start.
Yeah, because you'll always run into this idea of, I need to learn that thing first, or I need to learn that thing.
It's the perfect excuse to play video games.
Yeah, or just do anything but actually write a tune.
Yeah.
And thankfully...
Yeah, because writing can be very painful.
Yeah, and it can be a rough process for some people, and some people really beat themselves up over it. So, thankfully, working with him was a great way of getting past that. And ever since then, it's kind of snowballed, and it's become kind of a regular part of something I do, and really something I kind of market myself as more of a composer. Is
that a regular part of your daily practice?
Oddly, no. I tend to go through phases with writing. Mm-hmm. There tend to be long periods of where I won't write, but then there are periods where I'll write and there'll maybe be a fully fledged tune every week or every 2 weeks. And by fully fledged, I mean it's in a chart, it's been arranged, I could just take it to a band and rehearse it.
One thing that I believe in as a writer myself is I don't believe in the idea of a writer's block. I don't believe that they exist. I know people say that they have writer's block, but myself personally, I just wanted to share that with you, that I don't believe in writer's block. I believe I just don't feel like writing today.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I think, and the reason why I'm thinking about that is when you talked about that self-critical voice, a lot of times when you have writers, if somebody has what they think is writer's block, then what is the first thing that they think of is like, oh, my well is dry. I have nothing to say. I'm a loser. And then it snowballs. And for myself, I just think, hey, just wasn't able to solve this puzzle today. I'll come back to it tomorrow. Or maybe I'll come back to it in a few minutes. Or maybe I'll write 5 things that I know are not going to be part of the tune and then just throw them out tomorrow when I get back to it again.
Right.
Just to get the noise out onto paper, so to speak, or onto the guitar neck?
Yeah, I think since I got loosened up from that, mental restriction, let's say, for me, writing has been a case of exactly what you said. I just don't feel like writing today if I'm not in the mood. If I'm not in the mood, I'm not going to force it. However, if I get even a nugget of an idea, like I find myself catching myself singing something that I've never sung before, or a new melody, or I find a new little cool chord voicing or a chord movement, then that's usually a cue for me to just pick up a pen and paper and just start jotting ideas down.
And how do you keep your musical ideas? Do you keep it on your phone, or do you record it into your DAW, or how do you do that?
So that's actually an interesting question. Part of it is I write it down, and part of this process came from what Tim Miller called writing for the trash can, which I've spoken about a little bit with students and other people here and there. But basically it's the process of writing without expectations. So you start with a chord, sing a couple of notes on top of it, write it down, and then just move as swiftly as you can through the whole thing, so it becomes more of a stream of consciousness exercise. And then you give it a title and sign your name at the bottom just to give it a sense of finality, like, I wrote this. Now, the point being how this translates to keeping stuff written down is that usually these are all written as little dots. There's no rhythm involved when writing it on the page. But then what I'll do is I'll put it into Finale and usually export it as just a MIDI piano file of just harmony and melody. And I find that usually if the tune sounds good just as that little MIDI piano mock-up of melody and harmony, then the tune can stand up with a band or any instrumentation you throw at it.
You are a modern stylist. You compose in the contemporary jazz vein. I think that's pretty much safe to say. And I'm wondering about one's journey, your journey and somebody else, that's why I say one's journey from playing something very basic. I'll grab my guitar here, and we all might know these changes. Going etc. to something that's quite modern sounding. How does one do that? How did you do that?
Right, that's a great question, especially because one thing I'm very transparent about is that I came to jazz through rock and metal, because that's how I started playing guitar. So oftentimes one of the biggest things I'm doing whenever I'm teaching for the most part, is usually trying to get people to make transition phases into jazz. So getting from the basics, I think one thing that does have to be said is it's if I think about it, it's kind of a merging of two worlds, because to really properly get kind of a modern jazz voice, so to speak, you do have to have an understanding of what jazz is. And that isn't just an understanding of, oh, this is fusion or this is kind of a more modern sound. No, you do have to go to the roots. For example, you're playing Stella by Starlight. For those who aren't familiar with the changes, you have to know what Stella by Starlight sounds like. Or, if we're working with standard tunes, that kind of sound. Where the other sound comes in is kind of this more modern contemporary approach, which is a little more colorful. It's not as block chordy. There are maybe a lot more dissonances, which if you played it, let's say in a big band context or a traditional like 3-4 piece combo in like a very heavy jazz program, let's say, like a very traditionally oriented jazz program or that type of gig, those voicings will not cut it, because they are they'll
clash.
Yeah, they will clash. It isn't part of the, let's say, that era of history in music. So that comes from modern classical, but also, just more modern explorations where people like, hey, minor seconds can sound good in a chord. It just depends on how you voice it.
Right, like you're not going to be playing those particular voicings on a Thad Jones chart.
Yeah, exactly. And to do so would probably be considered sacrilege.
Yeah. And you'll be kicked out.
Yeah, and good luck getting any gigs after that.
Exactly. One of the things that is a mainstay of your playing is your chord voicings. So and you do play a lot of really gorgeous sounds, and so taking that, like, again, if I went from playing these basic chords, as we'll call them,
sure,
to here, and I changed it now to and went on from there. How does one go from these basic? I guess that people are now calling them shell voicings. I never learned them as with that particular name, but
right.
These kind of shell voicings.
Root third seventh.
The root third seventh. How do you go from that to these kind of sounds? And maybe you could demonstrate.
Sure.
How you would do it.
So let me just grab my guitar.
And I'll put mine down. You can take center stage by.
One thing, the foundation of a lot of my playing are basic drop 2 and drop 3 voicings. So if that sounds alien to a lot of people, it's just these very simple voicings that probably all of us know and have played at some point. There's nothing alien about them. It's just a way of classifying those chords and just making them easily understood when we're talking about them. So what I might do is I might just swap notes around at first. Or even before that, I might just try inversions. Especially inversions that have any sort of second in them. Like this. Like that's a beautiful little chord motion.
Yep.
Then F minor. That's like a little bit of a variation, but that leads to my next point. After maybe finding a couple of nice, pretty inversions and stuff like that, then I might start changing notes around. So yeah, this voicing that I kind of played over here kind of leads me to my next point, which is tension substitution. And tension substitution is where you can substitute little parts of the chord that already exist, like maybe you take one or two or more notes and you start changing them out for a tension. For example, on this first chord for Stella, that minor 7 flat 5, I might play, instead of playing the G in the lead, I might substitute that with the 11. So that gives it a lot more of an open sound because it's not as descript. I'm not playing the exact sound. The sound is implied. Or I might use that as a passing note. And so on and so forth to create little moving parts in my chords. So therefore I'm not treating my harmony as just an exclusive block chunk of harmony. I'm treating them as maybe moving voices.
I'm just trying to dispel the myth that this is like, it's all mystical and, they see your hands go, they hear the seconds and they hear the resolutions and the internal voices moving, the inner voices moving, and they think, oh my God, I'm never going to get this.
No, that's one thing I really try to tell people who are coming at jazz for the first time from a rock or any other musical background, rock, funk, pop, whatever it may be. And I have a lot of empathy for those students because I still have very vivid memories of not sounding great as an improviser, of just sitting and shedding and trying to get chord voicings, even just trying to get these to flow, to feel like they're a part of my playing. So I totally empathize with those in that situation, and there is no mysticism behind it. It's just a lot of work.
Do you think that there's anything to this idea of, like, it used to be back in the day where you would have, third and seventh, and then you would put your extensions above that, whatever you want to play. Lenny Breau would do that when he would be like, and then he would be playing the lead line, whatever solo he was playing at the same time. It seems like I heard somebody talking about, I'm going to now put the root at the lead voice, and then I'm going to put the extensions on the bottom. For A7, like an A7 altered note third, natural 13.
Oh, that voicing.
Yeah. So if it was...
Sure. Right.
Of course, play something totally easy at the end.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, no, if I were using that chord, one thing I'd be very aware of, this is kind of one thing I try prescribe to students or people who are trying to understand a little more of that modern sort of sound, is that you can't think formulaically as you're using this stuff. Yeah. What you have to learn is how the chord sounds and integrate that in your ear so that when you remember this stuff, you're not thinking of, I can throw that chord shape in there. You're thinking of the sound and how to connect that to the music.
That voicing sounds... voicing sounds like an expression. That's why I'm having the difficulty finding the words for. That voicing feels like an expression. Yeah. It doesn't feel like hackneyed. That's really what we're all after. People talk about, I'm doing this for expression, I'm doing that for expression. I think that expression comes from many, many, many hours of becoming fluent in the language.
And fundamentals.
I'm speaking about the language in the broad sense. Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's my thought. That's how I came up with that voicing. You actually saw me come up with that voicing, and I was just thinking, this sounds great. No third. Yeah. And it would be sacrilegious at the early stages. I'm not saying for all you guys who are just starting to do this to get rid of the third of the chord. And don't do that.
I probably, when I was trying to get my stuff together as an early musician or someone, when I was at music school, I probably flew in the face of everything that I should have done. I didn't start at bebop and work my way there, but I started just accessing sounds that I liked. And maybe for me, that was the bridge I needed to get back to the stuff that I needed to get to, so to speak.
Well, you should have seen how much crap I went through when I was like listening to Albert Ayler, and people were like, "What are you doing?" Like, nobody likes that stuff. And I was like, I love it. And I love Eric Dolphy, and those I was listening to those guys from the start. And at the same time, this would be great for you guys to hear, because I'm underscoring what Juan's saying, is that my teacher was very, very methodical, and I think that there is a brilliance to that when you find somebody who can lay it all out for you and say, hey, follow this footpath, this proverbial musical footpath, and you will end up in the right spot after you're done with it. I did that. And then I did all this other stuff at the same time. So it's like exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
I did everything I shouldn't be doing, plus the stuff I should be doing.
And that's one thing that I think is very normal in the process, especially if you're coming at it from outside the jazz world and you weren't brought up in it. You're naturally, you've already been exposed to new sounds that aren't part of the style. That's already going to influence your outlook and what you like.
Yes. Now, Juan, you have to show your fans and your viewers this. This is your party trick. Can you please just show us your left hand? Yeah. And now do that thing where you hold your fingers like this and then you stretch.
Oh, right. Each individual thing.
Where you keep the middle fingers together and then you can stretch your thumb and your fourth finger out. Yes, that.
Yeah, it's like a near perfect line.
Yes, folks, Juan does have a large, very flexible hand. And can you show us some of the voicings that you are able to exploit?
Right.
The flexibility.
So,
don't hurt yourself.
Sure. Like a bunch of keyboard voicings, like that kind of stuff. Or one thing I was showing you earlier, like little movements like that, or big open voicings. There's one I found not too long ago. Like a really nice sus with a flat 9 kind of thing.
That's like a Richie Byrack voicing.
Yeah, or like a very big orchestral voicing. Another one you can do is kind of like that. Oop, is that the one I was thinking of? For kind of like a minor major 7 sound. Kind of like a major 7 sharp 5 sound. Just really trying to get all of these colors. Really see, because I think one thing the guitar, if you are capable of doing it and you're capable of playing some of these very close voice chords, they do sound very pretty on the guitar just because of the way everything resonates.
What are 3 really beautiful chords that we normal people can play that you could show us for, I don't know, minor 7?
Sure, for mine.
Seems to be a favorite of you too.
Sure, minor 7. There's a really nice rootless voicing that's really fun. I see a lot of people using it.
Oh.
So if I put an E bass and then play that on top. One thing you can do, so that's just D, G, A, F sharp. So if we're thinking of this in the context of E minor, it would be 7, 3, 11, and 9 accordingly on top.
Lovely.
So it's a really pretty sound. The other thing you can do, this is one thing I do a lot, is I take voicings and I kind of break them apart. So this is something, even if you see these big voicings, don't be afraid to treat them as 2 or 3 note cells. For example, like if I were to take this voicing for a major voicing, I could do to get more of a wide intervallic sound. So one of the things I like to do, aside from this voicing here, is I'll take this from a major 7 inversion, just that little 3 note cell, and then put it against different root notes. So if I were to live in that E minor world, just that little voicing by itself is perfect. And it's accessible. It's not, one of the big problems with these voicings, if you can't reach them in time, is to play them in time. So for example, which tends to be an issue, especially for those struggling with this kind of stuff, you know, playing. And get it to have that rhythmic punch, because, you know, you physically have to reach for it. So if you have these smaller 3 note chords, that's another one I use.
I love that.
You can put the root up top, or a root in the bottom.
I'm stealing all these now.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, all open to steal.
Now, I know this is a great segue into how you use this to play your single note lines.
Right. So one thing that really opened me up from an improvisational standpoint is using my chord voicings as arpeggios or target notes. Because this was something, like, I give full credit to Tim Miller for opening me up to this, because once I found the traditional triadic approach, or visualizing, you know, arpeggios to be kind of cumbersome, because for some reason my brain at the time couldn't really see it as an entire unit. So what I found that chord voicings did is that you can access the chord voicing more instantly than you can a full-blown arpeggio. So then if you can access it accordingly, you're able to break it up much easier, because you've already visualized it in your head, or where it appears on the fretboard, which I think is half the battle. The other part of the battle is knowing exactly what's going on in that chord. So with any chord voicing you take, really break it down and go, okay, what notes are available to me? Not just what notes, what intervals are available. Because then what you can start doing, let's say I have this lovely voicing that we all know and love, a minor add 9. I can take that and break that apart. And that suddenly becomes the basis for a line. So let's say I can either play that up and down, move that through changes, major 7.
Now, how are you picking it?
Sure.
How are you?
So my camera is just over here, but I'm doing, it's a very strange thing for me. It's, yeah, I've got pick, finger. I'm a hybrid picker, so pick, finger, downstroke, upstroke.
Okay.
And I know, like, you get that little...
That makes sense.
Yeah, you get that
sense.
little inside picking thing, which might be uncomfortable for some people, but for some reason that's the easiest way to flow. With the first thing, with this shape, what I was doing, there I was doing pick, middle, ring, downstroke, and then the rest. Yeah, we're talking about an alternate pattern I was using that was just...
I'm leaving that in. Okay, go ahead.
So, yeah, right. You got pick, middle, ring, downstroke, and then the rest is all a sweep up.
I wanted to add something. When you said you were doing the inside picking for one,
yeah,
something that the brilliant Marshall Harrison has pointed out is that if you only have to do one.
It's not terrible.
Uncomfortable music. Yeah, it's not terrible, and you can swing it. No pun intended.
Yeah.
You can make your way through it. If it's one inside picking in between strings, you're grand. If it's a sweep, well, that's going to be working in your favor anyways.
Yeah, it's if you have to do more than one where it starts to get really uncomfortable. More than one in one particular direction.
Yes.
That's why this is relatively easy. So you can move that through changes. So what I was saying is, yeah, that's one way of doing it. Just breaking it up, or just rather going straight up and down. You can change the note order. So if I take this, I can do or, and those are all starting from the bottom note. I could start from the second note from the bottom. Or...
So we're not talking about something abstract. Can you show how you would do this for the first, like something basic that the people watching could do? The first 4 chords of Stella?
Sure, first 4 chords of Stella. So take any...
And not too fast.
Yeah, so take any voicing you're familiar with, and this is the key. You've got to be familiar with the voicing. And admittedly, this is a very strange thing to work on because it doesn't sit well for the hands at first. So you've got to go very slow. Right? So just straight up, straight down.
And we should also mention, though, that we've just turned the tune into 6/8.
Right.
Which for some people that's going to sound like we just made this thing super complicated and now they don't understand what's going on.
Right.
If I may take the reins here just for a second, you're just taking a grip that you know that works, and you're going up it and down it, and then you're going to the next chord, which is a fine way to kind of piecemeal your way through it.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking, oh my God, I have to come up with eight notes, and I only know a voicing that's 3 notes. You know?
Yeah. Just use whatever voicings you have, because this is ultimately what you're training yourself to do. You're not training yourself to just kind of take an abstract concept. You're aiming to get to the point where you can take any chord voicing you want and do the same thing. And have it be a source of linear inspiration. So that, you know, you can take any, like this chord, for example, and, you know, maybe one day I feel like playing it totally descending. That's a different pathway I've never really played through Stella with. Or, maybe I could do...
And those are coming from voicings?
Yeah, so it's taking maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 voicings and piecing them together. And I might not be playing every note in the voicing, but it's serving as an outline for me to visualize how to get from point A to point B.
Now, since you studied with Tim, Tim is the big proponent of the 2-1-2.
Sure.
Arpeggio line situation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how that benefited you and what worked for you, and if something didn't, what didn't work for you?
For me, I found for a very particular reason, my hands tend to not like very tight grips. So anything that's very tight, like that's a very popular one he uses. I can kind of do it, but I remember working that for a month along with a couple of others and telling him in class one day, hey, Tim, I tried to work this as best as I could. This is where I can go with it. I found 2-1-2 is not really my thing, but 3-1-3 really fits well with my hands. For me, 3-1-3 is very easy on the fingers. And this is one thing he said. He's told me, hey, that's okay. Everyone has a different physiology, different muscles. Or even though we have the same underlying structure, so to speak. For example, I have a very long pinky compared to some people. So that's going to impact the way I play or the way I pick certain fingerings. Not many people would play a perfect fifth on one string. But that opens up different avenues for me.
And 3-1-3 works great for economy pickers, I should add, and legato players.
Yeah, exactly, because you're doing very minimal left-hand work. So then, aside from maybe straight linear patterns such as, I'd apply that to 1-2-3-5 patterns. Do little variations of those. Or make up my own patterns for maybe more abstract sounds. And use it as a way of connecting phrases together. So if I had, let's say, a longer line, and this can be with any variation, it just doesn't have to be 1, 2, 4, 1, whatever. So it's retaining maybe a little bit of the 2-1-2 concept. I use it maybe as a connector more so than a focal point for line creation. But the 3-1-3 happens to be one that fits my fingers very well.
Did you transcribe many solos?
Of Tim?
No, did you transcribe many solos in general?
Oh, just in general. Yeah, I did. There was a phase where I was a heavy transcriber. And I would just pick apart anything. I did some Brecker stuff. I did some Redman. I did some Brad Meldau. I also did some Nelson Veras. That was a challenge. I actually did quite a lot of Nelson Veras. Even when I was a rocker and a metalhead, I would take apart anything I could. I got a lot of Marcos Foley, a lot of Andy Timmons. So I'd say from round about the ages of like 15, 16, up until maybe 23-ish. Like I was in a very heavy transcription mode, and I thought, I need to be transcribing a lot to get a lot of stuff under my belt. And this includes some stuff like Parker transcriptions and things like that.
What would be your word of caution for students who see people playing transcriptions on Instagram or YouTube, and they work up their transcription and they play their transcription with the recording?
Sure.
What cautionary advice would you like to give them?
What I would tell people is, transcription is a means to an end. Transcription is a means to an end, and one thing that I've also found is that it's very hard to get rid of the transcription label. And I mean, there is the classic saying, what's on the internet is forever. So people will always find you for that. And especially, let's say, if your goal is to be a player and a composer first, you want to have a degree of separation from transcribing because you're effectively playing someone else's work. So I guess it really depends on your goal. You know, if you want to share, and you've done it, I've done it, many of us have done it, and we just want to share, like, hey, I've really put a lot of work into this and I just want to share it with people, then absolutely, by all means, have at it.
After I did one or two that I video, first of all, I have to tell you, from my generation, the first time I saw somebody do that, and I can't remember at this point, but the first time I saw somebody actually having videoed themselves doing transcription, I was like, this is like, I shouldn't be seeing this. Like, I shouldn't be seeing you get dressed. Like,
right, it's
this
like practice.
This is something that happens in your practice room. Yeah, you might do it for a jury, you might show your friends or whatever, hey, check this out. But I found it really, really strange, and then I did it myself.
Yeah. And
you know, I just like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine, but that's exactly what I'm saying. And that, you know, if you're transparent about it and you just say, hey, I just want to share this, I personally have no problems with it, and I think very few people would. But if it's getting to the point where it's becoming, I think, a force of habit, eventually I as a musician find myself asking, what's next?
You mean if I'd done 13 of them?
Right, or, you know, like you're doing one every month or something like that, or two, or however many. Eventually, I do want to hear what the person themselves has to say. And transcriptions, as I said at the beginning, are a means to an end, to expose yourself to the language, to learn, much like you learn an actual spoken language. You know, And you said... I'm sorry, I was going to say, you said something that was really, really, I feel, the most important thing, and that is, there has to be, you said a degree of separation. I think there has to be many degrees of separation from you in that transcription. Right.
There just has to be, if what you're going for is to develop your unique sound, and then there is, if you want to be known for somebody who is an artist. We don't see Ben Monder putting up transcriptions. We don't see Tim Miller putting up transcriptions, and we don't see, the list goes on. Yeah. You know,
you need to kind of assimilate the influence, not parrot the influence.
Exactly. Do it, and then start becoming you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the end goal.
One thing that I want everybody to know is, how do they contact you if they want to study with you?
Sure. You can go to my website, www.juandhas.com. It's all one word. And just hit me up through the contact form there. You can also shoot me a message through Instagram, and I read through all my messages, so it comes directly to me.
Awesome. That's brilliant. Juan, you know, and I know this conversation could go on for the entire night.
Oh, it could.
So I just wanted to thank you for sharing your insights, your approach. And I mean, if I didn't have a ton of things to do, I'd take some lessons from you too.
Thanks so much.
I think that you're very welcome. I think that instead what I'm going to do is just steal all the stuff from this video.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I got the video. So I think that everybody here should, at very least, check out your music, and definitely sign up for some lessons, because as you can see, Juan's approach is very different and open, and it's definitely worth exploring. So Juan, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me this evening, and I'm wishing you all the best. I'm sure you're going to be very, very, very successful.
Thank you so much for having me on, Professor O'Kane.